Here we have a set math problem. Okay, let's go to the question. H of x equals to x negative 3 over x cube negative 3 x square positive x negative 3. For what value of x is the function h above undefined? Okay, here this is a stuff we have for h of x, and it is a fraction, and if I want this one to be undefined, the denominator has to be 0, because in any fraction if the denominator is 0, then the value of the fraction is undefined. Actually this is the one that is equivalent to h of x. So when this denominator is equal to 0, the function h is undefined. So that is, we have to find the value of x for which this expression, this cubic expression, is equal to 0. For that we have to equate this cubic expression to 0 and solve for x. So that is x to the third power negative 3x square positive x negative 3 equals to 0. Okay, here we can solve this cubic equation by factoring. That is, we have to factor this expression by grouping. That is, we have to consider this is one group and this is another group. Okay, now we have to get the greatest common divisor for the two terms over here. So that is clearly x square. So we can factor x square out. When x square is factored out, to get the stuff inside the parenthesis over here, we have to divide the terms over here by the one I factored, that is x square. When I divide this x cube by this x square, I am getting just x. When I divide negative 3x square by this x square, I am getting negative 3. Okay, so here, what is the greatest common divisor for this x and negative 3? That's 1. So we can factor 1 out. When I factor 1 out, still I'll be having the same stuff, x negative 3 inside the parenthesis equals to 0. Okay, now what is the greatest common divisor for these two terms? Clearly that x negative 3. So when I factor x negative 3 out, then what stuff do we have inside the parenthesis? Since we have factored x negative 3 out, we are left with x square in the first term. We can write that one as it is. Here x negative 3 is factored. We are left with the positive 1 in the second term. We can write this one as it is, equals to 0. Okay, here the product of two binomials equals to 0. Since the product of two binomials equals to 0, so either the first one must be 0 or the second one must be 0, or both of them may be 0. Okay, if the first one is 0, we get x negative 3 equals 0. If the second one is equal to 0, we get x square positive 1 equals to 0. Okay, now let's solve for x in this one. For that we have to add 3 to both sides. When I add 3 to both sides, negative 3 positive 3 will cancel. I am getting x equals to 3. Okay, now let's solve for x in this equation. For that we have to subtract 1 from both sides. Then the positive and negative 1 will cancel out. Then I am getting x square equals to negative 1. Okay, now to solve for x, we have to get rid of this square. For that, we have to take square root on both sides. When we take square root on both sides, the square root and square root cancel out. And whenever we take square root on both sides, for this square root, we have to consider positive or negative sign. So we get x on the left side, on the right side, we get positive or negative square root of negative 1. Okay, here we have a negative value inside the square root. So it is considered to be imaginary value. So here we get the two imaginary values for x. So usually we cannot consider imaginary value for x in any equation. So we can ignore this. So we can consider this one, because here we get a real value for x, that is 3. That is, when x equals to 3, so the denominator over here becomes 0. That means the value of h of x becomes undefined. So when x equals to 3, the given function h becomes undefined. So the answer for this question is 3.